Some of you may remember when Ben and I had our cars flooded. Now, we're still driving those cars, and that's sort of part of Nancy's jumping off point. You get your vehicle damaged by floodwaters. They don't necessarily end up in the junkyard. So Ben and I are still driving ours, but what about the guy who his car isn't always in the best of shape because it got hit by that flash flood or by a flood or whatever, cars down in Florida in some areas. And, they're going to be perfectly honest when they start to sell you that car. Nancy Cahalen joins us, and we're going to be talking about some of these vehicles damaged by floodwaters that don't end up in the junkyard. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, so that's kind of a scary thought. We're seeing the flood waters rising and the cars floating on the news at night, and our hearts go out to the people down in Florida, and we're not thinking that some of these vehicles could very well end up being refurbished and resold. And so we have to be very, very careful that we're not somebody that's making that purchase. Especially now, there's such a shortage of late model used cars that it's going to happen, and they're going to ship these cars outside of those flood zones so that the potential buyers are not suspicious.
Wow. I mean, isn't that something that we think, because we're watching all these commercials on TV now, Nancy, that, there's all these different ways to check out these cars and that couldn't possibly happen. But clearly, somebody can fool you. And I suppose that the person who's doing this, who's pulling this scam, they're going to have to do some work, right? I mean, they've got to make it, at least I would think, cosmetically make it look okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of work that's done to them. But once the vehicle is submerged, the water's gotten into the electronic system, and our cars today heavily rely on those the electronics. Some of this damage isn't going to show up for a long time. So Carfax actually says that there were 378,000 flooded cars back on the roads in 2021. That's last year.
Wow.
Now, this year, we're seeing multiple hurricanes hit, and the thought is that it's only going to get worse. So what do? We really need to be careful when we're shopping, and we have to ask to see the title.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, is there a way that somebody who is, unscrupulous, how are they sort of able to hide this from us? Again, I'm back to I thought that nowadays that we knew the history of the cars we were buying.
Well, it's not necessarily the owner of the vehicle. I just want to make that clear, because when the insurance company declares a car a total loss, the fact is that information isn't necessarily communicated all the way down the line to the potential buyer. It's supposed to get a new title called a salvage title. It should have the word salvage or flood on it. But in some states, the warning is a little less obvious, and it could be just a letter or a number in a code on the title. It's not the owners of the vehicles that lost them in the flood that are pulling this. So these cars are sent to salvage. They have salvage or flood titles. It's not necessarily that obvious, and they're resold. They might get new upholstery, you get shampoo, there's some work to be done to bring them back to lot ready, used car lot ready. But the fact is that they were totaled, and they were for a reason, and issues with the cars may come up down the road. And they probably will come up down the road. So it's important to look at the title. If it says salvage or flood, I would step away. No matter how good the car looks and how great the price is, there could be, most likely will be some problems down the road. And you should check the dashboard, examine all the gauges to make sure they're accurate and there's no sign of water in them. You know how water might get inside something with a little, the gauges have these little glass windows on them. You might see some condensation in there, or that would be a sign that this vehicle has been underwater. Electronic components, test the lights, the windshield wipers, all that stuff, the cigarette lighter if it still has one. Uh,
Right.
check it out, and it's I'm told that flex some wires under the dash to see if they bend or crack, since wet wires become brittle after drying. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, that's a
So
good one.
that's something to look for. Look in the trunk, look in the glove compartment, under the seats. There are possibly drainage holes that have been drilled into the vehicle. So look for that. Check for open drainage holes in the bottom of the vehicle. This is all pretty scary. Cars are not cheap, and especially in today's market. So check the condition of the fabrics. Look for discolored or faded or mildewed upholstery or carpeting. If everything was recently shampooed, that might be, you might want to double check. Carpeting that's been replaced may not fit quite right. It might be a little loose. It might not match the rest of the interior color. So that would be a sign that the carpeting's been replaced. And normally you would think, well, that's a great thing. It's got brand new carpeting. Doesn't it look great? It's just been shampooed. But it's a sign that it could have been through, a victim of a flood.
Right.
So we really need to be careful. You can get your vehicle history report from the National Insurance Crime Bureau, and but they're only helpful if the car was insured. If the owner of an uninsured flood damaged car tries to sell it on the open market and you're the buyer, you might not know about the problem. Because it's only if there was an insurance claim that history report is going to flag it.
Right.
So look under the hood.
Yeah. No, that makes that
Do a
makes
smell
some
test.
sense.
Does it
Yeah.
smell?
Well,
Yeah,
actually,
it's really a problem.
yeah. Although, if the guy's got like 7 or 8 air fresheners, in there, or it just smells like pine sol or something, you may go, yeah. What are we trying to cover up here?
Hmm.
That's a good point. All right, and obviously under the hood, if something just doesn't look right. All right, smell test.
Yeah.
What else should we perhaps do?
Well, I would say that this is a time when you should probably have an expert take a look at the vehicle. This is a big investment. You found some indications that it could have had carpeting replaced. There's a strong pine smell to the vehicle, or maybe a little musty. If you still are interested in it, I would invest in the money and have an expert take a look at it, just to be extra careful. There are 378,000 vehicles back on the road last year. So
That's incredible.
Carfax
Yeah.
has reported that. So, and they said Hurricane Ida, was it? 211 vehicles from that one storm made their way back.
Wow.
It's a huge problem.
I would think too, Nancy, that because you talked about a lot of times it isn't the person who had owned the car. It's sort of this middleman who's now gotten their hands on it. So another quick check. I'm sure as you're talking about with getting the inspection, the smell test, just like a real good one to me. But I can just go to the Better Business Bureau, right, and at bbb.org and see if that dealer, that middleman, has, I guess, any two things, right? One, is he accredited by the BBB, and two, are there some complaints against him?
Right. So, typically the totaled cars are sold at salvage auctions to junkyards and vehicle rebuilders. So that's where they're being passed off. Then they can't be registered if it's a salvage title. So there's something going on there that's they call it title washing. So, at some point along the stream, the scammers are getting involved. And it's really an alert for everybody. Be very leery of this. And especially now, because there's such a shortage of used cars out there.